And when it comes to Candida, although it can directly impact you, it's almost how it indirectly affects the immune system and indirectly affects other systems in the body that creates the issue. And I think that's why it's overlooked. We're always looking for that direct cause when it comes with a condition. We want to know what has caused this specifically.
Cue music. Places, everybody, places. We're starting in 3, 2.
Welcome to the Autoimmune Hour, where we look at the rise of autoimmune disorders. I've brought together top experts that range from doctors, specialists, nutritionists, researchers, and even those recovering from autoimmune to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information about autoimmunity and how to live your life uninterrupted.
Thank you for joining us here on the Autoimmune Hour with Sharon Sayler. Always seek sound legal, medical, and or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio. Join the Autoimmune Hour's Courage Club. Sign up now at understandingautoimmune.com. Now, back to your host, Sharon Sayler.
Welcome, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com, and as always, it's my honor and pleasure to be with you here on another brand new episode. And you can find all the previous episodes. We're at 480 and counting, closing in on 500 episodes. Hard to believe. And you can find all of those over at understandingautoimmune.com. And so we have an exciting return guest. She is awesome and also a busy lady. I read a blog post of hers clear back in March. And after that, I was so intrigued by her blog post that I decided to contact her, and we've just been able to work it into this busy lady's schedule. I totally get why she's so busy. So let me introduce our return guest. Her name is VJ Hamilton, and she's a registered nutritionist and an expert in autoimmune disease. She combines her knowledge with her medical degrees in biochemistry and immunology and nutrition therapy to offer a thorough and personalized approach to recovery and supporting her clients based on their most current scientific research. We're going to talk today and jump right in. She's got a much longer bio here, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But I want to have tons of time to talk about this important topic. VJ, thanks for being on the show.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me back.
And it's great to see you and everyone. We've got a time zone thing going on. So thank you so much for staying late so we could match up our time zones here. Now, I love that blog post that you did on Candida. I don't think it's talked about enough. When I first learned about it, it was prior to my autoimmune disease, and I did have it. And I thought I'd cured it. And then apparently it's not that easy to do, or you can't ignore it. On this blog post, everyone, her website is called the autoimmunitynutritionist.com. And I've got the post right up here on my screen. So I just want to refer to it. One of the things you had in this blog post, which was so intriguing to me, was this 10 question, if this is you might have Candida. So first off, can you tell us what Candida is? And then I'd love to get into some of those questions because some of them could be almost anything.
Yeah, that is the thing with Candida. It can create so many different issues in the body that it can be diagnosed as another condition, or if you have an autoimmune condition, then it might be put down to the autoimmune condition that you've got, but we can talk about some of those symptoms as well. But Candida is a yeast that grows in the body, and it is a natural yeast, and you expect to find it in the body, but it's when you have an overgrowth, similar to bacteria that you have in your gut. So it's when it's overgrowing and there is the imbalance in the body that it can create issues, and it can create issues for various reasons. And when it comes to Candida, although it can directly impact you, it's almost how it indirectly affects the immune system and indirectly affects other systems in the body that creates the issue. And I think that's why it's overlooked. We're always looking for that direct cause when it comes with a condition. We want to know what has caused this specifically. And when it comes to Candida, there are various ways that it can suppress the immune system and cause issues in the gut, and other factors as well. It can create an issue with histamine. And because of that, I don't think people really do much about it. But in my clinical practice, I see lots of clients who are having these systemic symptoms. And when I say systemic, they're having a headache, they're having skin rashes, they're having toenail issues, they're having alcohol intolerance, and they're not putting them all together and seeing it holistically. And when we do that, and they might do a stool test or they might do the Candida quiz, it gives us more information into whether the Candida is causing their symptoms.
I wouldn't have thought that toenail fungus and alcohol intolerance would be a similar symptom. That's what I found so fascinating. Now, before we get into the quiz, because there were a couple of questions in there that intrigued me. You said it's always in our gut, but can you get it from eating yeast? Can you get it from eating yeast products like breads and things like that? Is that how do you get it?
It's, as I said, it's naturally occurring in our body and it's in the soils, and we might pick it up from different sources. So it is quite a natural thing to be exposed to. But what can happen is it almost has roots, and it's when it can grow. And that's the thing with a lot of yeast, but also bacteria. When they overgrow, they almost become pathogenic, which is when they start to create symptoms for us. But when we eat yeast, that is slightly different. Some people can have a yeast intolerance. And when I see people have an issue with yeast, either through a food sensitivity type intolerance, which is an IgG response, or more of an allergy intolerance, which is an IgE response, that can be to do with yeast. But often when I find them having an intolerance to yeast, they actually have an intolerance to Candida as well, and that can be driving it. That's just something I've seen in clinical practice. And sometimes mold can be a factor in that as well. But as I said, it's naturally occurring, and the immune system would normally be able to keep it in balance. But if the immune system is suppressed for any reason, or if you're eating a high sugar diet, or if you're chronically stressed, then it's able to grow and thrive, and that's when it creates the issue.
Okay, good. So I can still occasionally have a piece of toast without worrying that.
As long as you're not yeast intolerant, that's
Okay,
fine.
good. You're one of the few people I know that talks about it very coherently and fluently and often. What happens when we bring it up to a medical practitioner who just poo-poos it? That's not a real thing. I've had medical practitioners do that before. Oh, don't worry about that.
There are many reasons. One of them is that it can be opportunistic Candida. So it can be creating an issue in the body, but it can be to do with other factors. For example, somebody might have a virus, their immune system becomes suppressed, and then they have a Candida overgrowth. So because your immune system has been suppressed, it's overgrown, and that's caused the issue. But I think when it comes from medical intervention, a lot of the medications that they've got aren't that effective, and actually Candida can become resistant to those medications. And also there isn't the scientific evidence to show when someone takes those medications for Candida, it helps with their autoimmune disease. But there is more research evolving which is showing this link between Candida and autoimmune disease, and the effect it has on the gut and the immune system, and how that might develop into an autoimmune condition, as well as other things going on in the body. But from a medical perspective, they're looking at diagnosing a condition that they can treat with a medication, which makes perfect sense. But when it comes to these chronic illnesses that have multiple factors, and something like Candida, which probably isn't going to, we don't know, but it's probably not going to kill you, for want of a better phrase, but it's going to impair your quality of life when you're living with it chronically, because the symptoms can be very unpleasant. And as I said, it can lead to a histamine intolerance and the development of certain inflammatory conditions like autoimmune disease as well. When we're talking autoimmune disease as well, Sharon, I'm sure you're aware of this, but there are normally multiple things going on in the body. So this is just one of the factors. But if you're one of the people where this is a large component of why you're feeling ill, and you're able to eradicate it, or at least lower it in the body, you're going to be feeling a lot better. And that's what happens with an autoimmune disease. You want to be feeling the best that you can. Unfortunately, they're not curable, but we can live symptom free and we can live feeling good. And if Candida is at the heart of your symptoms, then it's going to help you in the long run to remove it, or at least lessen it in the body.
Absolutely. And something just came to my mind, and I remembered from the blog post, and I want to talk about it real quickly. And you were saying some of the signs were things like toenail fungus and sugar intolerance, but I also wanted to bring up two that I thought were important. One was itchy skin, and skin issues are such a precursor to something as going funky with your immune system. I thought that was a
Yeah.
fascinating one, but also one that it could be several things causing the itchy skin, but that's so easily overlooked.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the other one I wanted to bring up was the coating on the tongue and the oral thrush. And I think about thrush when I think about babies for some reason. I don't know why that is, but I don't think about it as an adult onset issue. But when I was reading your blog post, it was the coating on the tongue. And the fascinating thing to me, and I'm taking a tangent here, I've had various what I'll call natural type of doctors want to look at my tongue, and it's fascinating to me how they are able to tell so much just from what's going on with your tongue.
I completely agree. So we with the tongue, the itchy skin, all these different issues can be, when it comes to your tongue, that is showing that the Candida is thriving, and it's just being able to, for whatever reason, there's an imbalance either in the mouth or in the gut, and it's been able to overgrow. And that can create symptoms in and of itself. It's not very nice having that coating on your tongue, but it also means that digestion in the mouth might be impaired as a result of that. And when it comes to itchy skin, one of the ways that it can create itchy skin is there are various ways that Candida can cause you to release more histamine than you ordinarily would do. And I find that more and more people are having histamine intolerance or mast cell activation syndrome, where they're releasing far more histamine than they should do. And actually, Candida can create that effect, not only because it dysregulates the immune system, but it can have a direct effect on the mast cells themselves. And it can also block you from degrading histamine. So it can affect this enzyme called DAO, which means that histamine can build up in the body. And one of the main symptoms of histamine intolerance or having a high amount of histamine is itchy skin. And it can become unbearable, where I will have clients come to me and they've been living with this for years. And they've been having to rely on antihistamines for a long period of time. And one of the reasons that this could be happening is because they have a Candida overgrowth. So that all these things are interlinked. And it's when you do a quiz, that like the one on my blog post, and you go through it and you realize, hang on a minute, all these things are linked. And what's the one consistent thing throughout this Candida? And that's when I know I need to work on that with my client.
Yes, I've been alluding to this quiz and I found it fascinating. And the first one was digestive symptoms. Do you frequently experiencing bloating, gas, or abdominal discomfort? And have you noticed changes in your bowel habits, such as diarrhea or constipation? And I was like, oh my goodness, like a lot of these, that could be a number of things. And how I could see Candida could be so easily overlooked. The next one was skin and nail issues. Do you have persistent skin issues such as itching, redness, and rash, especially in areas prone to moisture, such as your underarms and groin? And have you noticed changes in your toenails, such as discoloration, thickness, or crumbling? Now, would it be just your toenails? Sometimes I've had people tell me that all of their nails have done strange things after they were diagnosed and being treated for autoimmune.
It can definitely affect your fingers as well, and the skin as well on your hands. I think because the toes are in that moist environment, it's far more likely to take hold of the toenails. But I certainly remember when I went to Thailand and I fell over, my toenail came off. Sorry if
Oh
this
my
is too
goodness.
much information. And at the time, you think that it's because there's been an injury, but the truth is I just stumbled over. My toenail shouldn't have come off with that kind of just slightly tripping, but that was a sign that it wasn't attached properly in the first place, and that's what can happen. The toenail can come away, and it's just worth considering that, because I think people just think, oh, somebody stood on my toe, or maybe I've been wearing the wrong trainers, or they just put it down to something else. And that's when it's quite good to look at that list of other symptoms and tie it all together, because most people will think with bloating, SIBO straight away, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. But there is something called SIFO, so small intestinal fungal overgrowth, and it's not always bacteria. Although what I would say is when the bacteria is out of balance, that is when Candida likes to thrive, because there's a key bacteria called lactobacillus, which keeps everything in check in the gut. And when that is in low growth, again, I see this a lot with my clients, literally no growth of lactobacillus and a high growth of Candida. And that's when it can thrive and just starts creating issues, because it almost has roots that grow into the gut lining. And we know leaky gut is a huge issue in autoimmune disease, and it can create issues with the tight junctions, so it creating intestinal permeability. So this is an indirect way that it can affect the immune system, because when the gaps are wider in the digestive system wall, it means that anything that's in the gut gets into the bloodstream, including the Candida, but other things as well. And then that fires up an immune response. That can be an issue too.
Now, I want to circle back to the SIBO. I know there is a test, like a breath type test for SIBO, which is the bacterial overgrowth. Is there a test like that or similar type of test that you could do to find out if it's the fungal overgrowth?
I would do the stool test. That's where I would look for the Candida overgrowth, because Candida can create a biofilm and protect itself. It sometimes won't come out in a stool test, even if you do have it. There are other tests that you can do, like the organic acids test, which is a urine panel, but it's looking for the buildup of certain biomarkers in the blood, but it's filtered through the kidney, so it's in the urine. And by looking at those compounds that are built up, it gives you an indication of whether you have a Candida overgrowth, because Candida produces those compounds. So you know if you have a high amount, you likely have Candida systemically. And also from a stool test, you're going to get a better idea of whether you've got certain bacteria that are linked to SIBO, or if it's more that you have this overgrowth of Candida that's causing the bloating. So that's where I normally go in my clinical practice when I'm working with somebody, that where I suspect that it is Candida.
Now, I'm just curious. To me, I feel like Candida is probably underdiagnosed a lot. When you say suspect they have Candida, is it commonly underdiagnosed? It just sounds like it would be so easy to have.
I think it's hugely underdiagnosed, but it's because even if you were diagnosed with it, there isn't really the medical intervention at the minute that's going to help. There are things you can do naturally, antimicrobials, and supporting other systems in the body, like supporting your gut microbiome, can help to outcompete the Candida. But there isn't any medication, to be honest. There are medications out there that are antifungals, and they help to clear the overgrowth of fungus in that short period of time, but you will keep on needing them unless you're addressing the root cause of the issue. And that's why I just steer away from those types of medications, because I took them in the past and they didn't do me any good. I think they actually made the situation worse for me. And the way it would present with me is through my skin. And yeah, I've come out head to toe in issues, and it was all linked to Candida. And that's why I'm very passionate about this topic, because I know that it can cause so many different issues. And I used to get a lot of migraines as well. And migraines are very much associated with histamine intolerance. And as I said, histamine intolerance links back to Candida, but because it's not that direct relationship, it's not the first place someone would look.
Wow. Okay. It seems like it would be very complicated to diagnose it. Now, one of the things you have mentioned, some of the lifestyle types of things. Are there lifestyle changes we can make that could at least mitigate, if not eradicate, Candida?
I think one of the reasons it can become opportunistic and start thriving in our gut is because we're living in a state of chronic stress. And when we're chronically stressed, our body is in fight or flight. Our body isn't focused on digestion. And because of that's when we can get bacterial overgrowth, we can have bacterial dysbiosis, and that can lead to Candida. So working on our stress response, especially if we feel stressed or we feel that we are chronically stressed, is absolutely a key piece of this. So I would encourage anyone to find out what works for you when it comes to relaxation. The first thing is to understand what it feels like to be relaxed. And I know that sounds very simple, but a lot of the clients that I work with have lots going on in their lives, lots of excitement, but also lots of stress. But when it comes to relaxation, and I ask them about it, they are probably spending 15 minutes in a week where they're relaxing other than going to bed or being exhausted. And that's really not how we're meant to survive. And you've just got to be realistic about everyone's life. and we can't all be relaxing every day, but you can have strategies like meditation, journaling, walking in nature, being more present, I like to do breathing exercises throughout the day. Just having 10 minutes to myself is enough to just bring down my nervous system, calm down. And then when I do the next thing, I'm not building up all the time. It's just I'm starting from a low place again. So then I build up, but then I calm myself down again, rather than the momentum just building throughout the day. And then you just feel wiped out or wired at the end of the day as a result of just getting more and more stressed and more excited. So that's how I have found that it's a good way to manage it. Plus having a rest day at least once a month, if we could once a week, but once a month where you don't have any plans, because it's the plans that make us stressed. Just have a day. You can still do stuff, but just have a day without plans and look after yourself and do what you feel like doing on that day rather than having any commitments.
I like those ideas because I remember someone saying, "You're always in a constant state of stress." And I was like, "No, I'm not. I don't know what you're talking about." I did not know what it felt like anymore. I'd forgotten what it felt like to not be in stress, to relax. And it's almost as it builds on itself and it's creeped up slowly into my life where my life was all about doing. And I always had great reasons why I was doing that: job, motherhood, spouse, taking care of family members, whatever it was, other commitments. It snuck up on me so easily.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it felt like to relax. And when I tried to do those relaxation techniques, I found that it was really a struggle to finally just let it go. I was fighting staying tense. It was fascinating how my body was, "No, don't relax. Don't relax. You got all of this to do."
I was exactly the same. And that's why I understand when somebody comes to me and I ask them if I probably wouldn't ask them directly anymore if they're stressed, because I just know that we just a lot of the time aren't aware when we're in that stress state. And my baseline was so high when I look back to 10 years ago. That was the one thing I thought I had sorted, was stressed. I was like, no, I'm fine, I'm absolutely fine. But I look back now and I was living at a very high state of stress. Like that was normal for me. Even though I was having anxiety and panic attacks, I didn't really relate that back to stress for some reason. But obviously it's so interlinked. And it took me a long time doing lots of different things. I went for meditation weekends, which at the beginning I just didn't feel comfortable at all. And I think it was when I did my Pilates training and I was in a group with 10 women and we met Saturday and Sunday and did Pilates for 2 days together. We did meetings where we shared our emotions. And I'd never really done anything like that. To be honest, I wasn't very comfortable doing it. But after that, I felt a huge shift in my body and I realized what feeling relaxed actually meant. And to be honest, since then, I've really enjoyed feeling relaxed and doing acupuncture or doing reflexology or going for a massage when I can. And I really enjoy feeling relaxed now. And I make the most of it when I am feeling like that, because I know how beneficial it is to your body when you're in that state.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about myself when chuckling as we were sharing, because I too have tried various things, either going away for a weekend, like you said, to mine was a yoga retreat, and I too was not comfortable there. And I think it's because I'd forgotten what it felt like to be relaxed. And
Yeah.
I've kept feeling like must be something wrong with me. I don't feel right. But my right, I'll put in air quotes, was so skewed from years of stress that I
Yeah.
kept thinking something was wrong. A couple of weeks ago, we had Michaela Giles on, and she was sharing about the ANS, the autonomic nervous system. And what was fascinating to me was she said, if you're one of those people who fall asleep easily but wake at about 2 or 3 a.m., that's really a sign of stress. That's really a sign that your cortisol is peaking at that time and it's waking you up way too early. And I found that fascinating because I had to raise my hand to that. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I can fall asleep, but I'm always awake at 3. And that was so annoying to me, and to understand, oh, okay, that's a message from my body, although I didn't understand the language until recently. Okay, do some stress work, do some stress release work here. And I
Yeah.
found that helpful to understand, and that's what I feel like about Candida, all these sort of secretly coded messages that once you understand how to read them, you're like, oh, it makes perfect sense.
I had exactly the same issue with my sleep, and I would almost be proud of the fact that I could sleep anywhere and fall asleep very quickly, to a point where I was falling asleep on the tube in London and that type of thing. So it got to a bad stage, but I used to think that was a good thing. But I would do the same. I'd wake up at 2-3 o'clock and wake up not feeling great at all. And I think I've done lots of things around my sleep, but I find now that I can have just a really nice still sleep and get that restorative sleep, whereas before my mind was all over the place, was dreaming a lot, and then I'd wake up at, as you say, 2-3 o'clock and just not feel rested when I woke up at all.
I think it's a chronic issue, not just with people with autoimmune, though. But
Yeah,
I
I
always
agree.
warn people, if don't wait till it gets to the autoimmune stage. To me, autoimmune disease, at least in my experience with all the people I meet on the show, it creeps up slowly. There were markers along the way that if people had been able to read the secret code, they would have been able to perhaps do an intervention earlier than allowing it to get to a point where it became incredibly evident to the point you couldn't ignore it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's better when you catch them earlier.
The Autoimmune Hour will return after these messages from our sponsors. It's great sponsors like these that keep this show coming to you every week. Be sure and stop by understandingautoimmune.com to learn more.
Times TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
Now, what other lifestyles? So we're talking about rest and relaxation, understanding your stress responses, reducing your stress responses. I love that you mentioned breathing, because I think a lot of people don't realize they even live their life breathing very shallow, and that causes tension in itself if you breathe in the upper part of your chest all the time. If you watch a baby breathe, their whole belly moves. When you watch like a little baby sleeping, you'll see the whole
Yeah.
belly. So let's share a few other tips that you have for people to be able to, maybe hopefully never fall into a true blown autoimmune disease, or B, some ways to mitigate some of the symptoms that you've seen.
With Candida specifically, or just generally?
Oh, let's go generally, and then we'll zoom in on Candida.
There's lots of different things. I think movement is a key piece of it as well. And I find when my clients might have arthritis, they're in a lot of pain some of the time and they stop moving. But actually, moving can really help, even with a condition like arthritis. It can keep the joints lubricated. And actually, muscle mass is really important. There's more and more research around muscle mass and the effects that it has on the immune system. And it's never too late to do that either. I started strength training in my mid-30s and I absolutely love it, and that was probably part of my recovery as well. So just lifting some weights, as much as you don't overdo it, but gaining muscle mass as much as you can, because when women get into their 40s and 50s, doing a lot of cardiovascular exercise probably isn't the best thing for you at that stage. It's better to be lifting weights, doing weight bearing exercise like Pilates. So I think that's a key piece of it, the movement. And I don't think it's overlooked, but I think people think more about walking or doing cardiovascular exercise when you talk about movement, whereas actually stretching, weight bearing, strength training is also absolutely vital to your body. And as I said, when you have more muscle mass, you're generally healthier, you have less adipose tissue in and of itself is inflammatory. So inflammation is a trigger for autoimmune conditions. So we want to make sure that we're minimizing anything that can cause inflammation in our body. And actually moving and going outside and walking in nature can help with your stress response as well. That's a way to get more movement in too. Movement is a key piece. I have this reset approach that I use in my clinic, and I'm also creating a new program around it as well. But the key areas that I always look at are rest as number one. That is number one, because I think that's the one that's missing the most. Eat, sleep, we've talked about both those two. Empower, and that's about knowing your body and yourself and knowing what works for you. Because what I get from lots of people, clients and people in my community, is that they feel overwhelmed. There's all this information and they don't know if kale's good for them, or they don't know if they should be eating meat, or they don't know if they should be doing a gut reset protocol. And the truth is, it's going to be different for everyone. So the more you understand your body and how things affect you, the more empowered you are in your own health. And you don't need to start Googling things or taking the latest supplement or anything like that. Once you know your body, you're going to know what works for you. So that's the E. And then T is train, and train is about strength training or moving or just making sure that you're getting some physical activity in your life, whatever you enjoy as well. Don't push yourself into doing something you don't enjoy. You might enjoy team sports. Obviously, if injury is a risk for you, then that might not be the right thing, but then you get the connection and the social, being social and being around people as well. I suppose that is something that I haven't really mentioned. Connection and making sure that you understand your values in life and being aligned to them is absolutely vital too. And I know that I was a bit off track probably in my early 30s when I was at the worst in my health and when my autoimmune condition and my chronic fatigue was at its worst. And I just feel like I was a bit off track with my life. I was devoting many hours to my career, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, and I love what I do now and I devote loads of time to what I do now, but I'm doing something I feel far more aligned to. But as a result of that, I wasn't seeing my close friends as regularly as I'd like to. I wasn't seeing my family, but not as regularly as I'd like to. But now I really prioritize those things because they mean so much to me, the connection with the people I love. And that's made a big difference. And my dogs, of course.
It's fascinating. There's so much to unpack there. One of the things I wanted to comment on is on training or movement, any of those things. Is it beyond but help moves the lymph system? So that's the garbage takeout guy. That's the garbage person of your system. It helps move the lymph and cleans out toxins in your system. It helps strengthen the fascia and the connective tissue. And so there's so many things we think about, and we're saying, oh, but Sharon, my hands hurt to move. What I have found for me, and it's worth a try in keeping it within your ability, is sometimes different positions will hurt more than others. So one time I found I was sitting so much that it hurt when I sat, but when I stood up and moved a little bit, and that's just gently walking from one room to another or something, I was like, oh, there's some relief there. And so I want to encourage everybody that it doesn't have to be go get a gym membership right after you leave our show. Go get a gym membership. Just take your time and build into it. But I have found that the movement part has so many more benefits than building muscles is important, but it has so many more health benefits.
Yeah, 100%. The fascia point is huge because, as I said, I think the fact that I was connecting with other women was a key piece with the Pilates course that I did. But actually, it does help to release fascia. And at the point of, even when I started doing my instructor course, I could hardly do weight bearing on my wrists. They were so inflamed, and I had ganglions as well. So they were fairly deformed at the time. But I just found other things that I could do. And actually, even going to Pilates reformer class, which could seem very scary if you've got wrist problems, I would go and they would just adapt the class. I wouldn't do certain things and do other things instead. So maybe that's still a little bit intense for you, but there are definitely things that you can do. And if you have got pain, then work around that rather than just completely not doing anything. But I know it's easier said than done. I know my wrists were extremely painful. I had pain in my hip. I had issues with my ankles to the point that they were swelling. And at that point, I really couldn't do much. And that's when I really need to focus on diet and nourishment and Epsom salt baths and rest and restoration. That's where movement may be just something very gentle is going to be far better. But you'll be surprised, you can work your way to having quite a strong body. It just depends really what's at the root of your autoimmune condition, at the root of the inflammation. But hopefully once you've addressed that, you may see that your joints strengthen, your muscles strengthen. So yeah, I hope I wasn't sounding like some muscle woman, because I'm certainly not. But I do like strength training, but I don't really lift massively heavy weights. But I'm pretty proud of myself for getting to that point after having chronic fatigue syndrome.
Oh, absolutely. And the other part of one of the things VJ was mentioning, everybody, was to me, I see the combination, and that's know yourself, know your body. And she was mentioning it somewhat in terms of diet, things like know what you can eat, what you can't eat. And it's different for everybody. But the other part of that was that when I did try Pilates, I now have a Pilates instructor and I do an independent class, but I went through several Pilates instructors because some of them were real gung-ho. And I was like, no, you know what? I wish I could bend like that, but it ain't working. And I'm not going to go there. And having the courage to stand up and either say, know that you're doing the best you can in the situation and you'll get there if that's where you want to go. But also knowing find the right person to guide you is critically important. I think I went through 4 other Pilates instructors before I found the one who was right for me. Now, she may not be right for everybody, but you know what? She was right for me. And I want to encourage people. I even say that it's okay to fire your doctors if they're not listening to you. It's okay to fire your Pilates instructor. Maybe fire doctors is too strong a word, but it's okay to find people that will listen to you and you're specific, because it's really hard. I know from the opposite side, from the medical professional side, when someone presents, especially in autoimmune, the symptoms of the same condition can present so differently in each individual that I like to call it a game of medical whack-a-mole for the physician or expert or specialist who's trying to figure it out, along with the person who's going through those crazy symptoms.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I've been through that as well, Sharon, where I've been at a class and I see the instructor's trying to motivate you to do things. And I can't do this, especially when I had chronic fatigue. I just had a point where I literally couldn't do it anymore. Like my body is just giving up. And yeah, I had to start avoiding those types of classes. And I still actually do get quite nervous going to a group class where I know I'm not in control of how much I'm doing. It's just come from that time in my life where I was pushed through, and then I would literally crash for 5 days and feel like I had the flu. And I felt terrible. And the amount of classes that I cancelled, because I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be like, I can't go. I just feel so poorly. But it was just but it was chronic fatigue. I didn't have anything. I didn't have an illness, but that's what one of those classes would do. It would just floor me. So yeah, it's definitely worth working with somebody who understands chronic illness and hopefully understands autoimmune disease as well. And when I'm now training with people, I generally train with people who have an awareness of what it means to have chronic fatigue syndrome, or what it means when you've had joint issues in the past, because they take it at the right pace and they don't push you into doing anything that you're not comfortable with.
Yes, definitely. You don't want one of those gung-hos, just 50 more pounds, and you're like, yeah, no.
No way.
I can't lift a half a pound, and you're nuts. It's okay to set boundaries, everyone. I find people like, and it's a good thing. I'm not knocking it, but I'm just saying I've never seen it really work, that we get so fed up with, okay, I am tired of being tired. I am tired of this. I'm tired of that. I'm going to change my life, and radically jump into the deep end of the pool. And then maybe we make it. Luckily, let's say 3 or 4 days, and then you crash for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
My comment is that worth it? Let's do this systematically and build up to it to where we can keep the momentum going. Because if you've just exhausted every last little tidbit in those few days of going gung ho, I'm really going to get healthy, which is wonderful. I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying, consider the pacing of it.
Yeah. 100%. Give 80%, leave 20% in the tank, because you're going to need it for the most part, especially if you have an inflammatory condition. And something I learned actually along the way, I did some genetic variation testing, and I often run this with my clients as well. And it's in my IL-6 gene, so my interleukin-6, which is a cytokine which can promote inflammation, and it can particularly promote inflammation after exercise. So even now when I'm exercising, I'll be very conscious of making sure that I'm getting my antioxidants in, because I know that I'm more prone to inflammation from exercise. And I still have that in the back of my mind when I'm doing anything, which maybe isn't the best thing, but I think it probably is. It's the empower point, is know yourself. So I'm always very conscious of that, because I know inflammation can be something that could cause me to go into a flare or another condition or something else. And so I'm very mindful of that. And I think it's just good to be aware of that for some people, actually exercise in and of itself can create inflammation, but only when we do too much of it. And we don't know what that too much is, because it's going to be dependent on you. So I couldn't even give you a time or a type of exercise. You just need to understand your own limits. And I think that recovery time is a really good thing to check in on. So once you've done some exercise, if you feel okay in the morning, or especially even after the exercise, it gives you energy rather than completely depletes you. If it starts really depleting you, you're doing too much, or if it's taking you days to recover, you've done too much. So just start scaling it back until you feel good after it, and you also recover pretty quickly.
And this may sound totally boring and tedious. However, I suggest keeping a little workout journal of what you did and how long you did it. And that gives you a success marker. You can put a little gold star by it. Whoa, I went out and I did this today. But also then, like, how you're feeling 2 hours, 5 hours the next day. Okay, I still felt good. I'm going to redo that. And maybe I can put 5% more effort into it, or 10% more time into it, or another quarter of a mile walk, whatever it is. But I like that because you can look back where you were and not where you are now, and you can go, woohoo, good for me. But you can also see the pattern of, okay, as long as I keep doing it at this rate, whatever that rate is, I'm not crashing and burning for 2 weeks and losing all the momentum I had. And then maybe that day where you're like, and you just stretch it one little extra bit, and then you'll see the pattern, like, oh, okay, yeah, I did see I started to get inflamed and things like that. So maybe dial it back 1 degree or something like that. But I'm a big believer in watching the patterns, because it really helps you know your body. So when you're talking to someone else, a professional on some other thing, when you know your body best, it's very simple then to say, you know what, that doesn't work for me. How about if we do this? Can we adapt what you just said to this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I really like that idea. I think with anything where we're working on it or changing it or hoping to progress with something, keeping a journal can really help. And I love the fact that you can celebrate at the end if you've got a bit further, or if you met the goal that you're looking to achieve, whatever that is for you.
Absolutely. Celebrate big. I'm a gold star girl, so that works for me, and it's cheap. Although it's hard to find gold stars anymore, but anyway. When I was growing up, they were everywhere. The little stickers were everywhere.
Yeah, I know.
But do celebrate whatever that is when you meet certain milestones. Maybe it can be as simple as, at the height of my muscle weakness, just walking outside and going down to the end of the block and back was a big woohoo. And
Yeah.
I think now that I can walk several miles, you're like, wow, I did that.
Yeah, exactly. And I find that with my clients, they will come to me and sometimes they will say, I've failed. And I feel so sad when they come and say that to me, because they've maybe had a day where they maybe just, I don't know, didn't do much and just ate the food that they didn't want to eat, or something happened and they failed because of that one day. But actually, we should really be focusing on these things that we're achieving, however small it's progress, rather than thinking of the things that haven't gone so well. As long as you're moving forward, that's the main thing. And that's why I think celebrating each week, I send emails every week to my clients, check in with them, ask them to celebrate their wins, because otherwise we can just get lost in this failure mindset, and you haven't failed at all. You've probably done really well. It's like my to-do list seems to get quite long, and I just think about the things I haven't done. But actually, when I look at it, I'm like, look at all the things I've ticked off. I should be celebrating those things rather than just thinking about the things that I haven't got to yet. So yeah, I think that we need to switch our mentality a bit, especially when it comes to progressing with your health, and treat yourself like your own best friend. Think about if your best friend did what you've done, how would you treat them? Would you say they'd failed, or would you be congratulating them and do that to yourself as well?
Absolutely. Two things come to mind with that. I remember this was a few years ago, and I had been doing quite well on a really good trajectory of continuing to improve how I was feeling, the inflammation markers, all of that. And then I'm not sure what the trigger was, but something happened and I had a flare. And this was before I learned to track those sorts of things. So at the time, I didn't know what the trigger was, but I got fairly sick, not as sick as I had been, but it was noticeable. And I went to my medical professional and I was lamenting, and I failed. I've had this flare. Poor me. And she made this wonderful metaphor. She said, Sharon, when I met you, you were down in this really deep valley digging a big hole. And when I met you, you were just digging this hole. And now we've climbed this mountain and you've slipped one little foot on the mountain. You are not in that hole.
Yeah,
So having that
exactly.
little metaphor that I had just slipped back a
That's
step or two
perfect.
was really important to remind me.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what keeping track of it. That's where I started keeping a little more meticulous track of it. And yeah, there are days I forget. Even just being able to see the broader pattern is really helpful in healing. And I love the idea that you send emails and what would you do for your best friend? Because what comes to my mind, one of the main things you mentioned was about eating a food. And I have comfort foods and I know what they are. And some of them do trigger gastrointestinal events that I don't like. But just even being aware, oh, I am craving my comfort food. Oh, okay. What's going on in your world that's driving this craving? What do you need to change to be comforted instead of going and eating your comfort food? To me, it was like a duh moment when a professional said, I said, oh, I'm craving my comfort food. And why are you needing comfort? What's going on in your world that's behind the need for the comfort food? Seemed a duh kind of question.
No, but it's so true. And I think we all miss this, that we're just craving a food. But I'd probably say at least 75% of the time when we have those cravings, actually, there is more research coming out about the gut microbiome, even Candida, around that causing us to crave food. But often we're doing it because of some comfort, or because we feel like we deserve a treat at the end of a hard day at work, or there is that reason around it. And I know there are things that I love to do which probably aren't the most productive, but I like to read a magazine. So instead of going and eating some comfort food, I'll now make a cup of tea, like a nice cup of herbal tea, which I absolutely love now. I get quite obsessed with things, that even healthy things, and read a magazine. And that to me is comfort. Or have an Epsom salt bath and just spend 30 minutes listening to whatever I'm listening to, like a podcast or an audio book. And that to me, now I'm realizing, when I need comfort, or going and giving somebody I love a cuddle or stroking my dog, that to me, I realize is actually what I'm needing, because I've had a high stress day, or I've done something which caused a lot of stress and I'm now feeling the relief from it, or maybe somebody's upset me. It can be various reasons, but I know now, okay, I need to catch that. I don't need to go and eat a load of beige food normally. Some form of beige food for me. I really like refined carbohydrates. I'm not really into sugar, but I like refined carbohydrates, which generally ends up being the same thing in the body anyway. But yeah, instead I'll do one of these things that makes me feel good. And actually Pilates is part of that as well. So having a list actually is quite a good idea, because in those moments, it's just easy to just go off track. And if you do, don't feel guilty about it. We all have those moments, and one little moment like that, or even a couple of moments like that in your week, isn't that big a deal. But when you've got a list of the things, or just actually finding out, what do you like doing? I ask a lot of clients that, what do you love to do? They don't know, they've forgotten. So having that list of things that make you feel happy, make you feel loved, make you feel comfortable, make you feel safe, and just looking at that list when you're not feeling great is just a good thing to do. And then actually, I'm just going to sit and have a cup of tea, read a magazine, and just sit here for 15 minutes or half an hour. And hopefully that moment will then pass and you can get on with your day or your night.
Absolutely. And I can hear the mom voice in my head from decades ago when I was mom of young ones. Yeah, having a half an hour by myself. But that's called boundaries. And even young children can understand that mommy needs 15 minutes or mommy needs a half an hour, and have that conversation of, when this happens, this is going to be how it works here. Because that was my first thought. I was like, oh, when I had young kids, that would have been nice. But having those conversations with your loved ones, including small people, young people, they understand.
And getting them involved. I know some of my clients that will do not the full yoga, but might do a little yoga class or have a chill out time. So you can do it together as well, or maybe do some cooking together. And that might not be the relief or the comfort you need, but actually doing those things with the people that you love can be very relaxing and comforting.
Absolutely. And we're just about out of time. And as the audience knows, I always go tangential. I did want to ask one quick question about sugar cravings. Is that a sign of Candida? And then I also want you to share more about the work that you do and your wonderful blog and podcast as well. So back to my question, is sugar craving a sign of Candida?
Yeah, sugar craving has been shown to be a sign of Candida. Candida actually ferments sugars in the body as well. And there is a strange symptom that can occur when somebody has Candida overgrowth and they have sugar, is that it can ferment and they can almost feel this drunk feeling, or they can end up experiencing some form of brain fog. So that is just something to look out for. So it is quite interesting. I talk about that and write about that in my blog as well, if you want to find out more about this very strange symptom that you can get from Candida. But they do link it to sugar cravings. So if that is one of your symptoms, plus some of the other things that we've mentioned, like the coating on the tongue, the issue with the nails, the itchy skin, bringing it all together, then Candida might be at the root of it, and it might be something to look into.
It's funny that you mentioned that about the kind of drunk feeling. Years ago, I read a story. It was hard to believe. A young man was pulled over for drunk driving and he didn't drink. And they found out it was some sort of intolerance. So he must have had something like Candida to cause that feeling. That's fascinating.
Oh, yeah, because I'm not sure what they test actually, but it's acetaldehyde, which is the byproduct when the sugar is fermented. It's a byproduct in alcohol as well. So that's created in the body through both Candida and alcohol. And so I wonder if that's the thing that's tested. So that would be high, but obviously it's normally to do with drinking alcohol, but you can have a similar effect from Candida as well. So yeah, that is interesting. I'll have to look up that case.
Yeah, it's been a while ago. Let's see if I can find it for you. But I was like, wow. At first, I thought that's a novel excuse, but perhaps it really is true. So, Vijay, you have an amazing array of talents and insights, and your blog and your podcast are fantastic, as well as your own work. So please share with us what you do, and then also tell us about your podcast and your blog.
I specifically work with clients with autoimmune disease, as I mentioned, and I have a functional medicine-based practice in the UK, but I work internationally. I've got a virtual clinic, the Autoimmunity Nutritionist. I work one-to-one with clients, normally over a 3-month health transformation package, which can include functional testing, like stool testing that I mentioned, or the organic acids test, can really help to get to the root of the issue. It's not always one thing, but it gives us that extra layer of information so that you don't have to do as much trial and error when it comes to therapies around autoimmune conditions and their symptoms. I also have my blog, which is on my website as well, and you'll find my free resources over there. I've got the Autoimmunity Recovery Plan, which is a 5-step plan that you can take action on today and it will just give you some areas that you can work on for your health. I also have my podcast, The Autoimmune Reset, where I'm sharing lots of different information about different autoimmune conditions. I have my Friday 5, where I share 5 insights or 5 tips every Friday. So it's just a very short episode. And then I have guests on, so talking about different conditions. We talk about different areas as well. Exercise has been one of the things we focused on. I've had life coaches on, and I've had people who have had autoimmune disease and have come out the other side and been able to reverse their symptoms. So I love having guests on, and you find out so much from people, don't you, when you're interviewing them? And it's a real passion project for me, my podcast. I hope people enjoy it. I was inspired by you and your podcast and everything you do. I always have been. I've listened to your podcast for a long time, as I think I mentioned before, and I've gained so much knowledge from listening to it. So thank you, Sharon. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, VJ. and her podcast is great. And you're right. There is something about what I call survivor to thriver stories. When I hear them, make me feel like, oh, I'm not alone. Now, not that I want other people to suffer, but it gives me this, hope, the faith that it can change. When I hear these wonderful survivor to thriver stories, it just, other people have gone through it, so maybe someone else could understand what I'm going through. Because oftentimes when you get a diagnosis, you can feel so alone.
Yeah, you really can. Yeah, because when somebody hasn't been through it, they probably don't realize, especially with things like chronic fatigue, and they can be quite invisible illnesses as well. They don't realize how it's impacting you, and sometimes you just don't really want to explain the extent of things. You just want to carry on, and so it doesn't affect your job and other things in your life. But yeah, I love hearing people's stories. It really helps me as well.
Wonderful. So everyone, that's VJ Hamilton, and I'm going to read it carefully because I stumble over your website for some reason. It's the autoimmunitynutritionist.com. So sorry for reading that so slow, but sometimes my tongue gets tangled with that .com. It will be up at Understanding Autoimmune as a clickable link too. So if you weren't able to write it down quickly or whatever, please do that. And if you're watching us on YouTube, if you would please subscribe and hit the notification bell. It helps build our algorithms. We've worked really hard this year. We've doubled in size. We're still a small site on YouTube, but I am proud that the community out there, we've doubled in size as far as our subscriber base. And so thank you so much for those of you who have subscribed to the show. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please do, because that helps us bring our message, and wonderful people like I've met VJ all the way from the UK who understand autoimmunity and make a stronger community and bring more awareness to the world about this condition, because I don't have all the stats, but I believe there are a large number of people who are walking around with undiagnosed autoimmune conditions. And if we can help them bring awareness and greater health, that's what we're all about. So thank you, VJ, for being on the show. And everyone, have a great week, whatever your adventures, and join me next week for another brand new episode.
Thanks so much for having me,
Sharon. Absolutely, VJ, anytime. Oh, just love all your insights.